There was a deceased first love buried deep in Robert's heart. In the 4th year of our marriage, he kept a girl who looked very much like his first love, and I was the very last person in the world to find out. That day, the girl and I happened to be wearing identical red dresses. Robert frowned at me. "Red doesn't suit you. Go change." I didn't change the new dress. Instead, I chose to replace the husband who didn't like seeing me wear red. Chapter 1. When she realized we were wearing the same outfit, the girl beside Robert immediately pouted in displeasure. He turned slightly toward her and whispered a few words into her ear. The young girl named Zoe obediently turned around and left. Then Robert made his way through the crowd, through the haze of perfume and polished smiles, and stopped in front of me. He looked at me and frowned faintly. "Red doesn't suit you. Go change." The moment he said that, the entire table fell silent. Yet one by one, people couldn't help stealing glances at me. Just as the air was about to freeze, someone suddenly let out a snort of laughter. How ridiculous. So it's just a case of a bad imitation. I raised my eyes toward the speaker, Robert's cousin, and also the best friend of his deceased first love. When we got engaged and married, no one ever told me that there was an early departed first love living in Robert's heart. I didn't find out until I was pregnant with Andy, about to give birth. In the 4th year of our marriage, he kept a girl outside who looked very much like his first love. And once again, I was the last person in the world to know. Seeing that I remained seated, unmoving and silent, Robert's expression darkened slightly, his voice rising just a bit. "Sophia?" My gaze passed over the people seated in front of me and landed on Robert's face. Perhaps it was some kind of lover's indulgence. He was wearing a dark red tie, something he rarely did. I stared at that deep red against his chest. Suddenly, all sounds around me vanished. Before he could speak again in displeasure, I stood up, pushed my chair back, and walked out. Robert's expression softened slightly. "Come back quickly after you change." I pressed my lips together, even offering him a faint smile, but I didn't say a single word. Chapter 2. I didn't go to the lounge to change out of my new dress, nor did I return to the banquet hall. I simply turned toward an empty side door and left. The weather had already been gloomy when I arrived. By now, a fine, steady rain was falling outside. It was late spring, and rainy nights weren't cold. I didn't bother opening an umbrella and walked straight into the rain. When I returned to the Gonzalez house, the servant told me with visible delight, "Madam, the old madam has brought the young master over. She's waiting for you." My heart lifted instantly, and I quickened my pace. In the 1st year after our marriage, I gave birth to Andy, but Mrs. Gonzalez said my body had been severely weakened during childbirth, that I wouldn't have the strength to care for a child. When Andy was 1 month old, she personally came and took him away. I was so devastated at the time that I nearly collapsed. My body not yet fully recovered. I didn't even have the strength to chase after them. I could only cry and beg Robert. In the end, all I got was 1 day a week to see my son. I treasured it, but time passed in the blink of an eye, and Andy grew up. And yet, he grew more and more distant from me. Chapter 3. As I stepped up the stairs, I heard laughter filling the entire house. Andy was skillfully controlling a remote-controlled car, playing with practiced ease. Mrs. Gonzalez, the servants, and the nanny surrounded him, clapping and cheering. I couldn't help walking forward, my eyes fixed on that small figure. Andy glanced up at me once, then lowered his head and continued playing with the car. I waited patiently until he was done, then crouched down and tried to hold him, but he immediately turned and ran to Mrs. Gonzalez. "Grandma, I've seen Mom. Time to go home." "Go home." He hugged her leg, rubbing affectionately against her. Mrs. Gonzalez's face was full of smiles as she scooped him up. "Grandma's precious darling. Let's go home right now." My hands were still stretched out awkwardly in the air, but all they held was a cold emptiness. I always seemed to be this slow, this dull to realize things, just like how Robert humiliated me in public earlier. I didn't start feeling sad until I was already on my way home. Only after Mrs. Gonzalez had taken Andy away for a long time did I finally crouch down and cry silently. It felt like there was nothing and no one left here worth my attachment. It was already very late. I went upstairs and packed a few things, all my documents, and some personal belongings. I didn't touch anything else. As I crossed the courtyard, I saw the cluster of crabapple blossoms shrouded in rain mist. I had planted those flowers myself in the year I married Robert. I loved them very much, but I only paused for 2 minutes, and then I never looked back again. Chapter 4. Robert had drunk enough to feel slightly tipsy. He lifted his wrist and glanced at the time. Sophia had been gone for nearly an hour, changing into another dress, nothing more. The lounge was upstairs. There was no way it should have taken this long. He frowned and took out his phone to send Sophia a message. "Why aren't you back yet?" But there was no reply. Instead, Robert's assistant approached, bending slightly at the waist. He spoke in a low, respectful voice. "The driver says Madam already went home earlier." Robert's expression gradually turned cold. This was the first time Sophia had ever thrown a tantrum, and he had always hated it when women behaved this way. "Have Zoe come over." The assistant's heart skipped a beat, but he still nodded. "Yes, I'll go right away." When Zoe returned, she had already changed clothes, her hair loose around her shoulders. She looked like she had just cried, her eyes were still red, and her makeup had been completely removed. There was a pure, unadorned clarity to her, like a lotus emerging from clear water. When Robert Gonzalez saw her like this, he was visibly dazed. "Mr. Gonzalez, did I do something wrong tonight?" Zoe pressed her lips together and lifted her eyes to look at him. At the corner of her left eye were 2 tiny moles. Without makeup, they stood out even more clearly, and that spot was what made her resemble Robert's first love the most, Gabby. Robert reached out and cupped Zoe's face. Lowering his head, he kissed the small moles. In his drunken haze, he seemed to murmur softly, "Gabby." It wasn't until 3 days later that Robert learned Sophia had never returned after leaving the marital home that night. He didn't take it too seriously. Sophia Morales, though the youngest daughter of the Morales family, was very different from the other Morales daughters. She had gone missing as a child and, it was said, had suffered greatly. Even now, old injuries still marked her body. By the time the Morales family found her again, she was already 20. She hadn't even attended college. Her temperament had long since taken shape, quiet, withdrawn, timid, and weak. As a result, she was disliked by the Morales family. Mrs. Gonzalez didn't like her either. So when they later married, Mrs. Gonzalez set a condition. There would only be a wedding ceremony. Only when Sophia gave birth to a son would they register the marriage. Later, Sophia gave birth to Andy, but Mrs. Gonzalez still never mentioned registering the marriage. Sophia's timid nature meant she never dared to bring it up herself. By the time Robert returned to the marital home, a full week had passed since Sophia left. It was already the end of April. As he stepped out of the car, he immediately saw the crabapple trees beginning to wither. Seeing his dark expression, the servant hurried to explain. "In the past, Madam always took care of them herself. She never allowed us to interfere." "She still hasn't come back?" Robert asked. He walked forward slowly, his brows knitting even tighter. The servant shook her head and said softly, "Madam hasn't returned." "What day is it today?" Robert suddenly asked. "Saturday." "Has Andy been picked up?" Every Saturday was an unchanging rule, the day Sophia and Andy met. "Yes, he's been picked up and should arrive any moment now." Robert nodded, his expression returning to its usual indifference. "Go tell Sophia, if she doesn't come back within an hour, send Andy back to the old house." Chapter 5. Andy sat on the living room carpet, unboxing a new toy. A servant walked in and spoke carefully. "Sir, we've called Madam." Robert gave a brief mem, his gaze resting on Andy's small face. He looked very much like Sophia, especially his eyes. Fan-shaped double eyelids, long and thick lashes. His skin tone followed hers too, very fair. A little boy as delicate as carved jade and snow. But the servant didn't leave. After standing there for quite a while, she spoke again. "Madam said, she isn't coming back." Robert abruptly looked up. The servant was so frightened she fell silent at once. Even Andy seemed to sense something was wrong and put down the toy in his hands. After a long moment, Robert suddenly let out a cold laugh. Then he stood up and called out, "Andy, Daddy's taking you back." Andy got to his feet, then asked, "Aren't we waiting for Mommy?" "No." Robert bent down and picked him up. "Is Mommy not coming back?" Andy felt a little happy, but strangely, not all that happy. Robert carried Andy out of the living room and down the steps. As they passed through the half-withered crabapple garden, Robert finally spoke. Mommy didn't behave, so she's not allowed to come home for now. This is her punishment. Chapter 6. From the time I returned to the Morales family, to marrying Robert, to giving birth to Andy, these past few years, this was the most relaxed and comfortable period I had ever had. I no longer had to wake up at 6:30 sharp every morning, no longer had to cater to Robert's Western-style breakfasts, no longer had to count down to Saturdays every week, only to sink into quiet heartbreak and sleepless nights afterward. And I didn't have to think about when Robert would come home at night, or whether he would come home at all. I could sleep until 10, then get up slowly and cook myself a bowl of extremely spicy beef rice noodles. I could binge-watch dramas until 3 in the morning, crying through an entire box of tissues, even when Andy's kindergarten teacher called, asking me to participate in a parent-child activity. I still felt a twinge of sadness, but calmly told her, I no longer have any relationship with the Gonzalez family. In the future, please don't contact me about Andy. Thank you. After hanging up, I looked at the phone calls that the Gonzalez household servants made like clockwork every Saturday. I frowned slightly. Tomorrow would be Saturday again, at 9 in the morning. I didn't wait for the servant to call this time. Instead, I dialed the number myself. Chapter 7. Madam? Sir, it's Madam calling. The servant's voice sounded excited, tinged with delight. Robert felt a faint tremor in his chest. But when he spoke, his tone remained cold. Tell her Andy isn't coming today. The servant froze for a moment, then relayed the message as instructed. After a short while, she returned again. Madam asks if it's convenient for you to take the call. Robert set down the newspaper in his hand. He lowered his eyes and unhurriedly folded back the cuff of his shirt. Only then did he extend his hand. Give it to me. As he took the phone, soft, shallow breathing came through the receiver. It sounded distant, yet somehow close at the same time, like a gentle brush against the tip of his heart. Through the floor-to-ceiling window, he saw a vast stretch of crabapple blossoms outside. He suddenly remembered a day when she had run toward him with flowers in her arms, nearly bumping into him. That had been after their wedding, one of the rare moments she showed a lively side. Robert thought, since she had taken the initiative to lower her head, he would give her a way out. Sophia, do you know what you did wrong now? The breathing on the other end seemed to pause for a split second. Then her soft, steady voice flowed out. Robert, 4 years ago, we never registered our marriage. I know. He curled his lips carelessly. So after all this, she just wanted to register the marriage with him. In his view, it was only a matter of time anyway, just a trivial formality. So if we separate now, there's no need to go through any complicated divorce procedures. The smile at the corner of Robert's lips vanished instantly. What did you say? Chapter 8. His fingers gripping the phone tightened one by one. Don't have the servants call me every Saturday anymore. I won't go back either. I've also made things very clear to Andy's kindergarten teacher. Sophia, what do you mean by this? Robert, I won't take any of your property, but the $88 million you gave me at the wedding, and all the gold jewelry, I won't return those. Consider it compensation for giving birth to Andy. In nearly 30 years of his life, Robert had never felt anger like this. Yet when his anger reached its peak, his voice instead grew even gentler. You've thought this through? I have, Sophia answered without the slightest hesitation. Robert hung up the phone directly. The servant standing not far away didn't dare even breathe loudly. Just moments ago, Mr. Gonzalez had looked as though he was smiling. They had all secretly breathed a sigh of relief. After all, in recent days, the atmosphere in the house had grown strange, oppressively heavy. But now, after Robert Gonzalez ended the call, the coldness on his face was terrifying. Take the phone away. Robert stood up and called the servant over. He took 2 steps forward and saw the stretch of crabapple blossoms again. His chest felt even more stifled. He turned back and issued another order. Have the master bedroom upstairs cleaned again. Move Sophia's things somewhere else. I don't want to see them. The servant hesitated for a moment, then hurriedly nodded. Robert strode outside. His phone vibrated. A call was coming in. He glanced at it. It was Zoe. but he had no interest in answering. A counterfeit was still a counterfeit. Zoe couldn't compare to Gabby. She couldn't even compare to Sophia. That night, he truly shouldn't have humiliated Sophia. She was angry, wronged, unwilling to come back. If she wanted to make a fuss, then let her, with her kind of temperament. Once she suffered setbacks and got bullied outside, she would naturally know to come home. Chapter 9. But Sophia seemed to vanish into thin air. After that phone call, there was not a single piece of news about her. There was even a time when Andy wasn't feeling well. Mrs. Gonzalez brought him over, hoping Sophia could give Andy a massage. Andy had always been frail since birth. Sophia had taught herself many methods for pediatric care and conditioning, but when the servant called, the number was already unreachable. Mrs. Gonzalez flew into a rage. I've never seen such a heartless mother in my life. If she doesn't come back today, then she should never come back at all. The Gonzalez family is no different with or without her. Fuming, Mrs. Gonzalez took Andy and left. Robert sat on the sofa, silent for a long time. It wasn't until dusk that he instructed the driver to prepare the car. Go to the Morales residence. When the car arrived outside the Morales home, the Morales family was quite surprised. They respectfully invited him inside. Seeing Robert's displeased expression, Mr. and Mrs. Morales exchanged a glance. They asked cautiously, "Did Sophia make another mistake?" They had never been particularly attentive to this daughter they had painstakingly found after losing her. What's more, the child was nearly 4 years old, yet that marriage certificate had still not been obtained. Just thinking about it made the Morales couple feel stifled. Robert paused slightly, teacup in hand. "She hasn't come back these past few days?" The Morales couple looked even more surprised. "No." Robert slowly set the teacup down. She hadn't returned to the Morales home, and she had no other place to go in the capital. So where had Sophia Morales gone these days? "Did you two have a quarrel?" Mrs. Morales asked even more carefully. Robert was already standing up. "Just a small disagreement." "Then it must be Sophia's fault." Mr. Morales' face darkened. "I'll call her and give her a proper scolding." Robert stopped him. "No need. We'll resolve it ourselves." "Well, that works too. Married couples fight at the head of the bed and make up at the foot of it." Mr. Morales smiled as he accompanied Robert out. But just as Robert reached the car, he suddenly turned back. "Sophia's household registration booklet, it should be with you, right?" Mr. Morales froze for a moment, then was overjoyed. "Yes, it's with us. If you need it." "Robert, I'll go get it right now." Robert shook his head. "Keep it for now. If I need it in a few days, have Sophia come back to get it." "Of course, she can come get it anytime." The Morales couple happily saw Robert off. They had long since lost hope about Robert and Sophia officially registering their marriage. They had even prepared themselves for Sophia to be cast aside, for Robert to remarry someone else. But they hadn't expected a sudden turn for the better. Robert's words clearly meant he was considering registering the marriage with Sophia. For the Morales family, this was tremendous news. From now on, who would still dare mock them, saying they were only half related to the Gonzalez family? Chapter 10. After staying for half a month in the town where I had lived as a child, I went on to visit many other places I had always wanted to see. I had always been frugal. With such a large sum of money in hand, it was more than enough for me to live on for a lifetime by myself. I planned that during my travels. If I came across a town I truly liked, I would buy a small one-bedroom apartment and settle down. As a child, I had been sold around, fostered, and even lived in orphanages. What I longed for the most was a home that truly belonged to me alone. The Morales family, where my biological parents were, was not my home. Robert's house wasn't either. After all, for years of a de facto marriage without any legal basis, it was nothing more than a castle in the air. Now that I had left that place, the only things I couldn't let go of, aside from the flowers I had planted with my own hands, were, of course, Andy, whom I had risked my life to give birth to. But I knew very clearly as well, Andy staying with the Gonzalez family was the best choice for him. I was different from others. From a very young age, separation was what I was most used to. So although I was reluctant to part, I didn't remain trapped in that pain for long. What's more, once I left, everyone was pleased. Robert could marry someone he truly liked, even though I had never officially held the title of Mrs. Gonzalez. In the end, I returned to the small county town where I had lived for several years as a child. That county was called Sophia, and housing prices there were very low. I had originally planned to buy a small apartment, but in the end, I bought a small courtyard house instead. The local customs there were especially simple and sincere. The most peaceful and happiest time of my life had been spent right there. It was just a pity that the elderly couple who had raised me for several years back then had already passed away. When I was handling the property transfer, I unexpectedly met the older brother who used to play with me often when I was little. Seeing me, Oscar Jean was pleasantly surprised. "Emma, why is it you?" When I was adopted by the Jean family, my name had been changed to Emma. Seeing Oscar also took me by surprise. I had never imagined that the small courtyard I bought would turn out to be their family's house. "Brother, long time no see." I looked at Oscar, and those distant, warm memories came crashing down on me like roaring waves. I couldn't control it. Tears streamed down endlessly. "Didn't you get married?" Oscar wanted to wipe my tears the way he did when we were young, but when he raised his hand, he stopped. "Where are your husband and child? Why didn't they come with you?" "Emma, how have you been all these years? I heard your biological parents found you. Have they treated you well?" I just shook my head. I couldn't say a word. I only wanted to cry freely, without restraint. People are like this, only in front of those who love them the most. Do they dare to cry so unreservedly? I hadn't seen Oscar for many years, but the moment I saw him, I became the little Emma from childhood again, and he became the older brother who always carried me on his back and coaxed me. "They didn't treat you well, did they?" Oscar's eyes were a little red. "That makes sense. If they had, you wouldn't have come all this way alone to buy a house. This place is hundreds of miles from Beijing. Emma, how much have you suffered?" "Brother." I tugged lightly at Oscar's sleeve. My eyes were swollen from crying, yet I was smiling. "I just saw the neighbors drying a lot of wild vegetables. Can you make that soup noodle dish you used to cook for me when we were little?" Oscar looked at me for a long moment. Then, just like when we were children, he rubbed my head and smiled. "All right, big brother will make it for you." Chapter 11. Robert went to see Zoe one last time. At that banquet that night, Zoe had been radiant and triumphant, like a flower in full bloom. But now, she was clearly much more haggard. "Don't call me again in the future, and we shouldn't see each other anymore. The apartment and the car will be transferred to your name." Robert looked at her. Her long hair fell over her shoulders, her face bare of makeup, fragile and pitiful. She looked very much like Gabby. Yet for some reason, his heart stirred with no emotion at all. "I won't be coming here again." After saying that, Robert turned and left. Zoe couldn't help crying. "Mr. Gonzalez, I don't understand. We were doing so well before. You said you liked me very much." "I never liked you. But you said you wanted me to stay with you." "I have a wife. But you don't like her, do you?" Robert lowered his gaze and saw the wedding band on his ring finger. Did he not like her? If he truly didn't like her at all, there were 1,000 ways to end that marriage. But when he first met her at the Morales house, he had felt a sense of pity for her. It was just that Sophia Morales was too timid, too quiet. Many times, she was like a shadow, optional, easily overlooked. It was hard to feel her presence. Yet in the months since she left, Robert had found himself deeply unaccustomed to her absence. He had tried going out drinking and indulging with friends, looking for new amusements. It wasn't that he hadn't met women who resembled Gabby even more than Zoe did, but none of them stirred his heart. He barely even thought about Gabby anymore. Instead, he found himself often thinking of Sophia. They had been married for 4 years, yet even in private, Sophia would still blush and not dare to meet his eyes. When she pressed her lips together and smiled, 2 dimples would appear at the corners of her mouth. Like Andy, she had very fair skin and delicate features. Now that he thought about it carefully, Robert suddenly realized, in those 4 years of marriage, they had been intimate often, and he had never once grown tired of her. In these months since she left, he hadn't touched Zoe at all. Just last night, he had even dreamed of Sophia. dreamed of scenes that were unmistakably intimate and lingering. Robert suddenly instructed the driver. Stop by a flower shop. He bought a bouquet of red roses. That evening, he also bought a red dress. In truth, Sophia looked beautiful in red. It complemented her snow-white skin and flower-like beauty perfectly. He decided to take a step back, to bring the flowers and the dress, and go bring her home. Chapter 12. And just like that, I settled down. After graduating from university, Oscar started a business with his classmates. His company was in the city, and his days were always busy. But every weekend, he would come back to Susui to keep me company. The neighbor auntie often teased me kindly. Emma, I think Oscar really likes you. That day you were watering the flowers in the yard. He was standing beside you pouring tea. He didn't even notice the cup was overflowing. Leaning over the fence, the auntie laughed so hard all the wrinkles on her face unfolded. Emma, look at Oscar. He's almost 30 and still doesn't have a wife. Why don't you just marry him? Anyway, when you were kids playing house, Oscar was always your groom. My own brat was so upset about it back then. Oscar treated me very well, even better than when we were children. I might be a slow person, but I had been married once. After all, how could I not sense those feelings? Auntie, I don't know how to do anything. I never went to college, and I don't have any special skills. Oscar is so outstanding. His future wife must be an excellent woman too. I smiled, thinking of how Robert never took me to important banquets. Thinking of how the Gonzalez family had never truly accepted me. Thinking of how I didn't even have the right to raise my own child. If I had grown up with my biological parents, studied properly and earned a good degree, confident and capable, maybe that marriage wouldn't have failed so completely. Someone like me was probably better suited to living alone. That's not true. Oscar's voice suddenly came from outside the fence. The sun was setting. He wore a simple white shirt and black trousers. Tall and straight, gentle and refined, the silent, skinny boy from childhood had grown into a man with strength stored in his body. Tall and steady, someone who could shield the person he cared about from wind and rain. Emma, you're very good. Don't belittle yourself. Am I? I looked at Oscar in confusion. If I really was that good, why didn't my family, my husband, my child like me? Of course. Oscar pushed the gate open and walked into the yard. Everyone exists for a reason. They didn't see it, that's their loss. Still, I couldn't quite believe it. Like comforting a child, Oscar used the simplest examples to prove it to me. You know how to grow flowers. The same flowers always bloom more beautifully in your hands. You helped Auntie Song with massages. Her back doesn't hurt nearly as much anymore. A few days ago when I was working overtime, you helped me organize documents, data, and spreadsheets. Everything was simple and clear. You really helped me a lot. If you want me to go on, I could talk for 3 days and 3 nights. Oscar laughed. And the auntie laughed too. I could talk for 3 hours as well. The dark clouds in my heart seemed to be brushed aside just like that. That night, for the first time, I told Oscar about Robert. I also told him about Andy. Oscar was silent for a long time, saying nothing. Later, he drove back to the city overnight. When I heard the sound of his car leaving, my heart was actually very calm. In these short 20-odd years of life, I had experienced too many separations. It was as if I had already grown numb. It wasn't until dawn that I finally drifted into sleep. But I soon heard the sound of a car again. Still groggy, I got up. I walked to the window and pulled back the curtain. I saw Oscar getting out of the car. He was holding something and quickly walked to my room. Emma, he kept his voice low, afraid of disturbing the neighbors. I hurried to open the door. Oscar? He stood there, fatigue still lingering between his brows, but his eyes were exceptionally bright. Emma, I went back and got the household registration booklet. If you're willing, and if you don't mind that I'm several years older than you, then let's go register our marriage today. Chapter 13. Register the marriage? Yes, register it. Oscar said it with absolute seriousness. Once we register, you'll have a home. Emma, the word home held a temptation for me that was perhaps 10 times, 100 times stronger than for ordinary people. So what was merely a procedural formality in Robert's eyes was something unbearably heavy to me. but a child who grows up dependent on others, drifting from place to place, learns first how to read people's expressions. That was why I never once took the initiative to ask him to go register the marriage with me. Ridiculous, isn't it? Someone as humble as me, yet still unwilling to accept charity handed down from above. Emma, I was too young back then. I couldn't keep you at home. Later, I went to Beijing for university and asked around everywhere about you. After that, when I learned your family had found you, I was really happy for you. Your biological parents were wealthy, and I thought, after losing and finding you again, they must cherish you dearly. And back then, I was just a poor student, so I didn't want to disturb your life. There was deep pain in Oscar's eyes. If I had known they treated you badly, I would have taken you away no matter what. Mom and Dad talked about you often. When Mom passed away, she even called your name. They don't want you. They don't like you. I want you. Emma, I never planned to get married, but heaven sent you back to me. Oscar's voice suddenly caught. This time, I don't want to miss you again. At some point, my face was already covered in tears. As a child, I was kidnapped and sold. Later, when my foster mother gave birth to a son, she no longer wanted to raise me. I was often beaten, frozen, forced to do endless work. It was Oscar's parents who pitted me and raised me for several years. Later still, my foster mother forcibly took me back and sold me to someone else. In that household, I was beaten often, until I secretly ran away. I stayed in welfare homes and orphanages, and was briefly adopted again and again. Those drifting days felt like they would never end. I had thought about returning to the Jean family, but I was afraid my foster mother would catch me again and sell me, so I never dared to go back even once. I never imagined Oscar had been looking for me all along. I never imagined that when Jin's mother passed away, she was still thinking of me, and even less did I imagine that Oscar and I would reunite like this. Perhaps this was true fate, and everything in the past, with the Morales family, with the Gonzalez family, was nothing more than another trial endured for the sake of today. I cried until tears streamed down my face. Yet I looked at Oscar and smiled, shaking my head. Oscar, I can't register the marriage with you today. Emma, I saw the light in Oscar's eyes about to shatter. It hurt, so badly. I gently held his hand. My household registration booklet is still with the Morales family. Just going there and back will take a whole day. Chapter 14. I hadn't expected going back to the Morales house to retrieve my household registration booklet to go so smoothly. Nor had I expected my parents to be so gentle and kind toward me. This was something I had once yearned for desperately. But now, it all felt insignificant. When I left with the booklet in hand, they smiled and reminded me, once you've registered the marriage, bring Robert back for a meal. I knew they had misunderstood, but I didn't explain. Why create unnecessary complications? Given their way of thinking, if they found out I was marrying a man who didn't even possess 1% of Robert's wealth, they'd probably be furious enough to collapse on the spot. After leaving the Morales house, I took a taxi straight toward the airport. On the way, I received a call from Oscar. Emma, I can't wait anymore. I've just arrived in Beijing, just got off the plane. Wait for me. We'll register the marriage here in Beijing. I couldn't help pressing my lips together and smiling. All right, I'll wait for you. After hanging up, I quickly told the driver, Sir, I'm not going to the airport anymore. I need to go to the Civil Affairs Bureau. Please hurry. The day after Oscar and I registered our marriage, he took me shopping for many things: gold jewelry, clothes, and 2 luxury brand bags. I didn't actually like those things much, but Oscar said that whatever others had, I had to have as well. Then Oscar took me back to pay respects to his parents. After that came hosting a banquet in our hometown. As for the wedding, he planned to take me back to the city and hold a proper one. He specially bought me a red dress for the banquet day and asked me to wear it. When I tried it on, I held the hem a little awkwardly and walked into the courtyard. It was the best season of spring. At dusk, the crabapple blossoms were still awake. Looking at Oscar, I don't know why, but I suddenly thought of what Robert had said that day. Do I not look good in red? Oscar shook his head. A man who was always restrained and proper, who even asked for permission before holding my hand, suddenly bent down and kissed me. You look most beautiful in red. I froze for a moment. then couldn't help smiling softly, just as Oscar was about to pull away from that gentle, restrained kiss. I lifted my face and slowly closed my eyes. Outside the simple bamboo-fenced courtyard, Robert stood there. The red roses in his hand fell to the ground, petals scattered messily. He saw the sweet smile at the corner of Sophia's lips, those dimples that made her even more beautiful when she smiled. They stabbed viciously into his heart. He finally lost control and shoved the bamboo gate open hard. The loud noise startled Sophia and the man beside her into turning around. "Robert?" Sophia's face was filled with shock and disbelief. And that man, his arms tight around her in a protective hold, looked completely on guard. Robert didn't spare Oscar a single glance. He strode forward and grabbed Sophia's wrist. "Come back with me." But Sophia didn't move. She even forcefully shook his hand off. Robert turned back, his eyes darkening. "Sophia, I'll say it one more time. Come back with me." "Robert, I've already made myself very clear. I won't go back. Didn't you always want to register the marriage with me?" Robert took out the household registration booklet he had been carrying with him. "Sophia, come back with me now. We'll go register our marriage tomorrow." "But I'm already married." To Robert, it felt as if something exploded violently in his ears. "What did you say?" "Robert, I'm already married." Chapter 15. Just yesterday, Oscar and I registered our marriage. I looked at him calmly. The documents I went back to the Morales house to get yesterday were for that. Robert seemed so angry he actually laughed. "Sophia, don't forget, you were with me for 4 years and gave birth to Andy." "I haven't forgotten, but there's one thing I need to correct. You and I never registered a marriage. Our relationship had no legal standing. So, Robert, I wasn't actually married to you. You should go back now. From now on, I'll have to trouble you to take good care of Andy." After saying that, I turned away and stopped looking at him. "Oscar, let's go inside. I'm a little tired." I took Oscar's hand. He immediately clasped it tightly. "All right, I'll take you to rest." "Sophia." Robert stepped forward again and grabbed me once more. "Andy misses you very much." My throat tightened instantly, and my eyes reddened in the next second. Andy was only a little over 3 years old. He didn't understand anything. Even if he wasn't close to me, I had never resented him. Some mothers and children are simply fated to have shallow bonds. "If you come back with me, I'll have someone bring Andy over. From now on, the 3 of us can be together as a family." My heart ached so badly I wanted to cry. The irony was overwhelming. So he knew everything. He knew I missed Andy. He knew I dreamed of being reunited with my child. Yet he had stood by and watched Mrs. Gonzalez take Andy away, and still refused to grant it. Now that I wanted nothing anymore, now that I was leaving, he suddenly wanted to bring Andy back. So Andy could be brought back after all. So some forms of filial obedience didn't actually have to be obeyed. "Robert, there's no need anymore." Once again, I forcefully shook his hand off. "There's no need for a family of 3 to be together. If Andy misses me, he can come see me. If you allow it, I'll also come back to see him regularly." "Sophia, Andy is your biological son. You nearly died giving birth to him. You risked your life to bring him into this world. If you abandon him, aren't you afraid that if I remarry someday, that woman will mistreat him?" I had never seen Robert like this. Even when he was angry before, he had always been restrained. But now, his eyes were bloodshot. His handsome face twisted almost grotesquely. "When Andy was born, they used Andy to threaten me. Now that I was leaving, they were still using the same method. But I was no longer afraid of losing anything. Oscar had taught me this. He said that first I was Sophia, only then was I a wife. Or a mother. Those muddled years had long since erased my sense of self. Others looking down on me or ignoring me hadn't been entirely their fault. So now, I needed to live as myself first. Andy is a child I risked my life to give birth to. But he is also your flesh and blood. He was raised by Mrs. Gonzalez from the time he was 1 month old. For over 3 years now. She has loved him deeply. I don't believe she would let him be wronged. And besides, if that day ever truly comes." I took a deep breath. "Robert, I will file a lawsuit to fight for his custody." "So you're determined to be with him?" I nodded. "Yes. All for a red dress?" Robert sneered. "Sophia, in these 4 years, What I gave you, how much of that can he give you? It's not just for a red dress. I lifted my face and looked at Oscar. There was anger and indignation in his eyes. But more than anything else, there was pain and guilt. Robert, you can like many people, but in my husband's heart and eyes, there is only me. I've already cut things off with Zoe. And as for Gabby, I let her go a long time ago. Sophia, no matter what, we were husband and wife for 4 years. My feelings for you weren't non-existent. Robert's brows knit tightly. Clearly, he hated saying these things, hated admitting that he now had feelings for me as well, as if liking someone like me were a gift bestowed from above, a kind of charity that wasn't meant to see the light of day. But I no longer yearned for that meager, condescending affection. In the deepening twilight, the crabapple blossoms I had planted with my own hands were still beautiful, even more beautiful than the Shifu crabapples in the Gonzalez estate. Robert said he had let go. Hadn't I let go as well? For years had worn away all the infatuation of first sight. Now, I wanted to live an ordinary person's steady, peaceful life. Robert, I once liked you, but now, there's nothing left. Go back, and don't come looking for me again. You should marry a woman whose education and experience truly match yours. Someone you can proudly present. Not someone like me, who only knows how to tend flowers and plants. These 4 years, I held you back. I'm sorry. Robert. Standing in the night wind, I looked at Robert one last time. Back then, when he didn't break off the engagement and chose to marry me, I was truly grateful, because at that time, every single moment in the Morales household felt like torture. Robert took me away from the Morales family and gave me a temporary home. To the me I was back then, that was genuine salvation. After all, if he had called off the marriage, the Morales family might have treated me like a commodity, selling me off casually to some man. And for someone like me, who had been sold more than once as a child, that would have been nothing short of a nightmare. So even now, I still hope he lives well in the second half of his life, and I don't wish to become irreconcilable enemies with Andy's biological father. If we can part peacefully, then perhaps that, too, is a happy ending for everyone. Chapter 16, Robert's Perspective. Sophia and Oscar's wedding was held on quite a grand scale. In fact, considering Oscar's financial standing at the time, the wedding budget was already very high. But he was willing, and naturally, outsiders could only praise him for his devotion. Sophia cried at the wedding. She cried fiercely, far more fiercely than she ever had when she married me back then. She even said, "My name is Sophia." Every syllable sounds sweet, but the first half of my life was filled with hardship. I'm very grateful to my husband. Hearing those words at the time was rather grating. During the 4 years she was with me, I honestly don't think I treated her badly. In my circle, men who kept mistresses, lovers, second wives, there were countless of them. Which rich young man hadn't kept dozens of little mistresses? Yet I only lost my head once and kept Zoe, and I grew tired of her very quickly. Aside from that, I considered myself fairly restrained. I didn't believe that her husband Oscar could truly remain faithful for life. Men are like that even without money. They'll still cheat, let alone once they have wealth. So in private, I left a bit of leeway. Oscar's company kept expanding, and he made more and more money. Naturally, temptations would increase as well. By then, with Sophia's temperament, she surely wouldn't be able to tolerate it. If she and Oscar divorced, if I brought Andy to find her, perhaps she would come back to the two of us. But in the blink of an eye, more than 10 years passed, and Oscar never once took a wrong step. Sophia gave him a daughter. She looked exactly like her. I was unbearably jealous. Andy grew up and looked more and more like me, although the Gonzalez family was full of good-looking people. Looking like me, a lone man, wasn't exactly a blessing. Her relationship with Andy, on the other hand, grew better and better. After all, they were mother and son. How could they possibly end up with the kind of irreconcilable hatred written in novels? Andy would sometimes go stay with her for a few days. Sophia would naturally have him take care of his little sister. The bond between the siblings was incredibly close. Sometimes Sophia would also come over to see Andy. When mother and son were talking, I would find myself outside, tending to flowers and plants, feeling rather out of place. Every time I wanted to offer to take her back, but Oscar would always come to pick her up personally, guarding against me as if I were some kind of ferocious beast. Still, that wasn't a bad thing. With me as a cautionary example, Oscar wouldn't make the mistakes that men all too often make. And then Sophia, the rest of her life, would naturally be nothing but sweetness.